Hi folks, I'm Hazel Chu, I'm your Lord Mayor, and I have, sorry, it's just turning phones on mute. Welcome to this Friday's Chu and Chat. So I hope you all have your lunch with you. So as part of the lunchtime chat, we started this from the office because we realized we don't have a way of engaging people this year with outreach and with going to see people, which is what the role of the Lord Mayor normally does. So upon hearing that we're actually going to be in lockdown for longer, I decided the best way to do this is to have yourselves come in for a chat session on Fridays at lunchtime. So the previous weeks, we've had the Chief Executive, Owen Keegan. We've had the Deputy Chief Executive, Brendan Kenny, who looks after housing and homelessness. We have had Richard Shakespeare, Tony Flynn and Les Moore looking at parks, recreation, whitewater rafting, and a whole lot. So a lot of men so far so on the panel. And I have to say, part of that issue is we need more women in management roles in the city council. And someone actually had said to me recently, well, because the marriage ban only got lifted in the 70s, you will see that there was a distinct lack of female representation in the council during a certain period, which horrifies me, but thankfully we are improving now. So I'm delighted to bring you this session in Chu Chats called Breastfeeding in Our City. I'm a breastfeeder and I had difficulties at the beginning myself with breastfeeding, and it's thanks to various groups like Extended Breastfeeding Ireland, like the likes of the work that Denise does, and also the works that Aoibhinn talks about. We have formed a community that actually supports each other, and but we want to make sure that community becomes more formal in terms of the supports that we have in the city for mothers and breastfeeding. So we are going to talk about all things breastfeeding in this session, and the things that works, doesn't work, the things we're lacking. We're going to get Denise and Aoibhinn to talk about their experiences professionally and personally, and also then any questions you have, please put it in the chat box. Questions, comments, we'll read it out as we go along. And if there's anything that we miss, please email to lordmayor@dublincity.ie and we'll try to get it covered. So for the year that the role has been, it's been really surreal, as I said before. It's been a massive privilege, but it's also been kind of different. And one of the things I've noticed with the difference is being able to work closer with the managers. So trying to turn Dublin into a breastfeeding capital is one of my aims, and I really want to try to get the managers pushed on, not pushed, but working on it. And this is why this chat is so important as well, to get everyone's ideas, but to get our guests here to chat about about issues of breastfeeding and also solutions that we can have. So first we have Denise McGuinness from UCD, who has been a long-term advocate of breastfeeding and worked in various areas, in particular midwife before. So she has a wealth of experience in the area. We also have Aoibhinn Shuilleabhain, mother of two, Dr. Aoibhinn Shuilleabhain, sorry, so stand corrected, professor in maths, am I correct, in Trinity?
Yeah.
So,
an area I would use the title in, but thanks, Hazel.
well, and super mom extraordinaire, and both of them have been really good champions of breastfeeding. So I want to go right into you, Denise, and talk about kind of your background and how you found the area and the topic.
Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. I'm delighted to join you today with this conversation around breastfeeding, and delighted to meet Aoibhinn also today. We've met virtually, but not in via Twitter and social media. So I'm the mother of two grown-up children that were breastfed, and I had my breastfeeding challenges myself. And my early years, I would have actually received a lot of support from Cuidu support with my breastfeeding. So then as my career progressed, then I moved into the role of a clinical midwife specialist in lactation at the National Maternity Hospital. And I love that role there, which I took from 2007 to 2018. Then in late 2018, I joined UCD in the School of Nursing, Midwifery and Health Systems, where I'm a lecturer in midwifery. So I'm very interested in the education of midwives, now supporting mothers. And I've had a long career supporting mothers, so I feel I have the balance now to really help mothers get off to the best start with their breastfeeding. So first, I'd like to tell you a bit about a study I'm doing. It's called the Latch study. And that's a study where it's a big randomized control trial between UCD, the National Maternity Hospital, Kilkenny, Wexford and Mullingar Hospital. And we're looking at first-time mothers who are interested in breastfeeding and joining our study. And when I recruit mothers to the study, I have a few mothers who are definitely interested in breastfeeding. And a lot of mothers say, I'd like to give it a try. So there's a lack of confidence there in getting off the best start with breastfeeding. And I think that's important to bring up in our discussion around breastfeeding in Dublin today. And I also want to share with you that I did a service evaluation with some colleagues of our postnatal breastfeeding support clinic in Holles Street. And we set that clinic up initially for mothers one-to-one with a lactation specialist, where women could come back to the hospital one-to-one and see the lactation specialist for support up to 6 weeks. And we noticed back then that women were talking to one another and gaining support from one another in addition to the lactation specialist. So then we moved it to a larger room within the National Maternity Hospital. So women received peer support from their fellow peers who are breastfeeding up to 6 weeks. They received support one-to-one from the lactation specialist, and that really worked. And when we did an evaluation of the service there recently, we saw that of the 99 women who attended the clinic, 98 women were breastfeeding at 6 weeks, and all these women had challenges. And at 92% of women were breastfeeding at 6 weeks, at 3 months, and 77% at 6 months. So those rates are very high, and they're women who had breastfeeding challenges. And I was delighted when I was calling women, and my colleagues as well, asking them how they got on with their breastfeeding, what they liked about the clinic, how we can further support them. And I was expecting women to breastfeed for less, but in fact they're breastfeeding for longer. So I think we really have a turn with breastfeeding. Women interested, once they get the support, they will breastfeed for longer.
Well, Denise, we have a question in saying that Denise is saying, by the way, this session is recorded just so everyone knows. So I won't be reading out any surnames to protect people's data, but I'll just say your first name when you've asked a question. So Denise has had her baby in NMH and found great support, but not enough midwife support on the postnatal wards. And she wants to know what steps can be made to change the culture that does not support breastfeeding in public. So I guess that being one of the first questions, and we're on talking to yourself, Denise, what's the first thing that you think of that would help in terms of changing that culture?
Yes, I'm very surprised to hear that question come in. I felt mothers receive a lot of support at the National Maternity Health. We're very proactive and really interested in supporting women to breastfeed. It's very important that women attend antenatal classes so that they have the knowledge in relation to breastfeeding skills, and then they receive support from the midwives on the ward.
Oh, I think she meant that she was receiving support from the midwives, but there was not enough midwives at the time. So I think
yes.
That's where she pointed to. So it's a lack of resources. So I think
yes.
the fact that we see even recently with cutbacks on the community lactation consultant, that there needs more investment in the area, perhaps.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Aoibhinn, I'm going to move on to you, coming from a background of being a mother of two yourself and facing the challenges of breastfeeding or supports, whichever one you want to talk about. How have you found it? And give our audience a bit about yourself, I guess.
Yeah, so thanks, Hazel, for inviting me on. And in one way, I'm just like, oh, maybe I'm not the right person, because I'd never see myself as like, I'm a breastfeeding mother. I feel like I just did it. And I only did it for 6 months with my first boy. And I was really, really sad. I had to stop breastfeeding my second boy 3 weeks ago. And I'll talk about all that because it's all linked into the lack of investment, I think, that we have in the services in general. But I want to follow up on what Denise just said a second ago, because I had my first boy in 2019 and I had him in Holles Street in the National Maternity Hospital. And I loved the clinic, the 6 weeks that we could drop in, because it's such an isolating time. When you're a first-time mother, you're a new mother, you might be living far away from your family, so I was, and we had tons of problems that I never thought as a first-time mother. I didn't think that there would be any problems. I just thought, I'll just take my baby and I'll just breastfeed, and that's what we'll do, because my mother breastfed 6 of us, and I don't ever remember, obviously, they're small, I don't remember problems. But my boy turned out to be tongue-tied. It was something that hadn't been picked up in the hospital. So day 4, I was at home, engorged breasts, in immense pain, crying because this wasn't working. My baby was hungry. I didn't know what to do. So thankfully the public health nurse looked at him. She said, he's got a tongue tie. And I went back into the clinic and the lactation consultant was able to recommend somebody, and there was other mothers that had that, and we got it sorted and everything was fine after that. So that was great, and I loved that clinic. But while I was in hospital, my baby had low sugars and obviously couldn't latch because he had a tongue tie, but nobody diagnosed at the time. So they were very worried about him and said, we're going to need to give him formula. And I said, well, I don't want to give him formula because I want to breastfeed him. Is there does somebody else have formula that I could take from the milk bank, whatever like that? And it was just like, nah, you're just going to have to give him a bottle. And at the time, I just, you just do it because your baby's sick and that's what you're being told. But I felt afterwards that I was really sad about that because, I was well able to express colostrum. It could have happened. So I don't want to blame anybody because I loved the hospital experience for both times. But the problem is there's not enough midwives on the ward and they are just so under pressure for time and they are being pulled left, right and centre. You can see it. So they don't have the time to give that one-on-one that you do need as a new mother breastfeeding. So I just wanted to say there's lots of positives to what we have in the services, but there's a lot of negatives as well. And I think I'm in a unique position in one way because I was a first-time mother pre-COVID and now I've had my second baby in COVID, and the experience in the pandemic is so different. And I feel so sorry for first-time mothers because Denise, as you said there, that we should be going to the antenatal classes, but there weren't any, and there's no drop-in clinic. And only if you're lucky will there be a breastfeeding support group in your area that might be led by a public health nurse. And we had that. And we actually had a public lactation consultant. And that was such an amazing support because when my second boy was born, he was born with a tooth and a tongue tie. And I knew to be looking out for the tongue tie, but the tooth, I just didn't know at all. I was in midwife care, so I was able to be discharged after 24 hours. And I absolutely loved that service. But again, when I was in the hospital and I asked to see the lactation consultant because I wanted to check for tongue tie, again, it was 5 minutes and, she was in a bit of a rush and I just didn't feel like it was the support that I would have needed had I been a first-time mom. But because I knew I was going home and I knew the midwives were going to be coming to me the next day, I actually was okay about it because I knew this is going to be hard for a week until I get his tongue tie sorted. But again, I had that knowledge and a little bit more confidence as a second-time mother. But there's a lot there for first-time mothers in the pandemic. Now that's coming away from, what can we do for Dublin as a city? And I think somebody already mentioned culture. And I think that's the key.
There's a question and this is the question I posed to Denise about culture of breastfeeding in public. And this is the thing I think we all know here. And I'm seeing some of the attendees' names. I see Sue Jameson there, and she is an amazing lactation consultant. And I wish there was more of her. So, and I see members of Siju Kilkenny here as well. And there's a huge amount of support, but it seems to be either it's private or it's voluntary. And what it seems to be coming true time and time again in the last year of my role is that there isn't enough public and there isn't enough of a state supported or provided in terms of community level led. So I guess, Denise, we like Aoibhinn talked about tongue tie, and I remember the horrificness of trying to get Alex assessed back in the day and then finally realizing it was tongue tie and then having the cost. So that's a massive barrier, as Louise in one of our attendees are saying. Is there, from your point of view, if I was saying a lot of this conversation would be brought, hopefully, well, not hopefully, I'm going to be writing to the Department of Health and the HSE as well. What would you think is a barrier apart from costs in relation to tongue tie, and how can we do that piece better, Denise?
Yes, I think it's very important that every baby has their tongue, is assessed for tongue tie, looking at the appearance of the baby's tongue and also the function of the baby's tongue. So we don't just diagnose tongue tie on appearance, it's how the baby is feeding and feeding effectively. So that's why it's really important that a baby is diagnosed before they leave the hospital. But not every, there is a lot of discussion around tongue tie at the moment, and the research is telling us there are actually small numbers of babies that do have tongue tie. So there is a concern that maybe there's an overdiagnosis. And some lactation specialists have found that by giving more intensive breastfeeding support, babies are feeding better and there's less requirements for a tongue tie release that may not be required. Now, there are definite cases for tongue tie release, where there's a type 1 tongue tie where the baby's tongue isn't able to move past the lower gum ridge. And those babies most often need to have a tongue tie release. So it's at the moment where it's a learning curve. I like what Dr. Anne Doolin is doing in the Coombe Hospital. I'm not sure if Anne is with us today online, but she has set up a support service for mothers where they are supported for a few weeks following leaving the hospital and further assessment of tongue tie. I think that is very important. I would like to see more of that in Dublin, where a medical doctor at a hospital is actually moving forward with a clinic.
And Denise, are those at the initial, is that assessment at the initial couple of weeks after birth? Is that part of the hospital?
Well, every baby would have an examination of the newborn.
Yeah.
So at that time, the mother can be told there is no tongue tie at this moment. There's no tongue tie of concern at this moment. And looking at the baby's tongue appearance and function, that can be assessed at every initial examination of the newborn, and that discussion had with the mother.
Okay, no, I'm kind of, I guess from Aoibhinn's words there, I just remember it wasn't until I think week 5 or so, 6 before we got Alex's tongue tie assessed, and by that stage it was really painful. So I think we've all felt the kind of pain of a bad latch and how that can affect the feeding. So I just, and the idea from the Coombe sounds great. So I'm kind of taking it down as we go. So to say, these are things we should be doing. I have Marie here, or Maura, that says there's lots of support groups, voluntary groups. Why aren't mothers told about them? Aoibhinn, how did you find the voluntary groups yourself? Did you come across them yourself? I'm just wondering in terms of communication, are we promoting groups enough? So
absolutely. Can I come to answer that in a second, Hazel?
Yeah.
But just in terms of if we want Dublin, and we've got 3 wonderful maternity hospitals, and if they did do the tongue tie in the hospital, that would be magnificent, because I think the cost is so prohibitive for some mothers. I think Aoibhinn in their report, they said mothers on average are spending €440. Some families aren't able to, afford that. So I don't think it should be something that, if you can afford it, we can end to this. But in terms of the culture in the hospitals, I think we have a wonderful maternity plan, and we have a wonderful breastfeeding strategy and a wonderful national breastfeeding action plan. If we just implement them, we can answer a lot of these questions. So the plan is there. It's actually to put the money behind it now and to fund this important women's service. So I think that would answer a lot of questions in terms of when you've just given birth and what that experience might be like. But to say about the supports available from the voluntary groups, I was very lucky with my first. We had a lovely local group in Inchicore, and it was like a 10-minute walk from home, and I look forward to it every week, even though some weeks you're just like, oh, do I have to get dressed and get the baby out? But it was good to do it, and you have a chat and you see what people 4 weeks down the line are up against, and you can give some advice to maybe a person who's 2 weeks behind you, because you've learned so much in those 2 weeks, and then maybe there's a coffee afterwards, and that was just lovely. And also in Inchicore, and I'll give a shout out because I know there's some moms here already, there's a WhatsApp group called Mammary Mob, that some moms started, I think 6 years ago, from this breastfeeding group that was led by the public health nurse. And this group has expanded to, there's over 250 moms on it now, and it's just an absolute mine of information. And my love of women has grown so much, because women will support women, and particularly mothers will support mothers. And I've just felt so blessed to be part of this group that, mothers are voluntarily administering, but also sharing so much. So that's been lovely. again, I want to contrast that with now, where there was a support group set up because we had a public lactation consultant. She was redeployed, and now that group has dissolved. Well, not dissolved, but there's somebody else looking after it, and she's not necessarily a lactation consultant, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside. So I think it would be something very simple if in every health area there was a list of these are all the support groups that are available to you. Now, we can share it through WhatsApp. I have a friend who lives in Dublin 9. She was at the end of her tether breastfeeding. She had no idea what support groups to go to. I was able to ask my memory mob for contacts, and I shared them with her, and she's now happily breastfeeding again. But she had no way of getting in touch with that otherwise, because her experience with her public health nurse, she had to travel to that person, and so it's just a little bit less accessible. So I think having a library of all the voluntary groups, because we have wonderful supports with Cuidiú and the Latch League. I've never had to engage with them. I probably should have, actually, in hindsight. But when you're a first time mom and you're first time breastfeeding, it's like you're like, well, for me anyways, I didn't necessarily feel like I belonged to those groups, because I wasn't, I was just like, I'm just breastfeeding to see how it goes. And so I didn't feel like I was able to access it. So I think just more education around that in general. If your GP could tell you this, if there was lists in the hospital where you're being discharged, I think that would be very helpful. But I have lots of ideas, Hazel, what the city can do to change the culture. So if we have an opportunity to chat about that before the hour is up, I'd be...
No, we will. And I'm just kind of your experience of talking about kind of first time mom. I didn't go to a first group until probably month 2, because I spent the first 2 months locking myself away in the house, like a lot of people on this call probably would have as well, wondering, well, what the hell am I doing? It's the whole first time mother syndrome of, oh my God, how do I keep the small child alive? So it's and the accessibility factor. And I know someone had just commented there saying you can search by county, and details of local supports near you will come up on a list. So I think if we have that centralized in terms of where, because I know that the HSE has a mychild.ie that they keep updated as well, and there's a breastfeeding.ie, but it is hard when you're in the midst of it, you're in the thick of it, trying to find this information. So yeah, it becomes near impossible. I think before we move on to looking at the city, because the reason why I'm very focused on what we can do within the city is because I have 3 months left of term, and I want to make sure that within the next 3 months, who I can nudge and push in terms of making our city better for breastfeeding supports, we should. And this is why there is someone collating all the comments in the question and answer box as well, because we're going to be taking your comments back to try to push on what we can do better. So there's a good few ideas there in terms of outdoor space and also indoor space as well. Denise, you would have, I guess, seen Limerick as a capital city, breastfeeding capital city. What do you think we can do in terms of Dublin? Top kind of 5 things that you can think of, or
yes,
top 3
I think we can do that. So Limerick is breastfeeding friendly, and I think we can make Dublin breastfeeding friendly. I think it takes the village to feed a child, so we all need to be together to help. And we need health professionals, and we also need support groups. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank Cuidiú, the Latch League and Friends of Breastfeeding for all they do to help breastfeeding mothers, their support. It's really wonderful that we can all work together. So what would I like to see to make Dublin more breastfeeding friendly? I would like to see more lactation specialists in the community. So in the area that you work, I think even it might have been your area, where there's a HSE lactation consultant. And
amazing.
No, yes or no? Yes, there was. So
she's been redeployed. Which is
yes.
Boy, that's another answer I got from the HSE, which I wasn't entirely happy about, was that the funding was there initially when it was first set up, but she's now been, the position has been redeployed, and that's a fight we need to have. So sorry, Denise, I'll let you continue. So.
Yes, so that was the first lactation specialist, public health nurse lactation specialist that was employed by the HSE, which is wonderful. That I feel that's a breakthrough. In that, I know at the moment due to COVID-19 that post has been moved elsewhere, but it will be back again. And I think it's a start. And I would like to see a lactation specialist also in Dublin Southwest, where there are low breastfeeding rates, and also in Dublin North. But I've recently been told that the HSE are going to sanction a post from the Rotunda Hospital, which does have very good breastfeeding rates, to an area where there are low breastfeeding rates. So I'd really like to see that. I'd like us to look at more equity and equality in relation to breastfeeding for mothers across the city, because mothers from different socioeconomic backgrounds have different challenges. So everyone deserves to see HSE, public health nurse lactation specialist, or even independent IBCLCs who are lactation consultants also supporting women. So I'd like to see that in the community. So the hospital, so a nice plan running from the hospital to the community, where mothers have support in the hospital, support in the community, and then feeling breastfeeding that they're welcome everywhere. I'd like us to have those stickers around in museums, art galleries, coffee shops.
That's on my list. So
yes, we're breastfeeding friendly, and I know some of the audience won't like the idea of a sticker or a poster that says we're breastfeeding friendly, but I think we have to turn our culture around, because we have lost a whole generation of breastfeeding, and we have to move forward and really support all the mothers who want to breastfeed, and so many who want to breastfeed. So by having notices everywhere that we're breastfeeding friendly, it's really getting the message of breastfeeding out there. So I'd like to see that happening, Hazel, around the city. And I'd like to see breastfeeding champions in every workplace, so that each workplace would have a breastfeeding room. So mothers who go back to work, and now with the new HSE guidelines, which it's fantastic that mothers can actually have a breastfeeding break when they go back to work up to the age of 2 years, which is amazing. And that's thanks to Laura McHugh, who pushed that, our National Breastfeeding Coordinator. So I'd like to see each workplace having a breastfeeding champion who would look at where mothers coming back to work can breastfeed for, and utilise and more breaks for everybody, not just the HSE. And so every workplace is breastfeeding friendly. I'd like to see that happening as well. Aoibhinn, I'm going to give you a chance now.
Aoibhinn, your top 5 of how to make the city breastfeeding friendly, and we have lots of comments coming in and ideas as well. So again, this will all be collated, because again, this is part of the push. So Aoibhinn.
And I think, having a brainstorm where all these ideas are coming together is wonderful, Hazel. So thank you so much for sharing this. So I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of weeks now. So as I see it, I think it separates into 2 kind of systems. So first is like all the answers in the health system, the things that we can do right there. And the second is what we can do as city, as Dublin City Council. So as Denise already said, she's covered a lot of the points there. In the health system, as I see it, if they're all properly staffed, as in if there are enough midwives will probably have enough time to spend with mums. So properly staffed, lactation consultants available 24 hours a day or 7 days a week. Because oftentimes you hear terrible stories about people who can't see them at the weekends, and you lose mums like that, and because your confidence is so low, you're so vulnerable, when you've just had a baby. So properly staffed, full-time lactation consultants in all the maternity hospitals 24/7. As Denise said, public lactation consultants, and the plan, the National Maternity Plan, has this in it. It just hasn't been implemented, and I can get very angry about this, because I feel like women's health gets deprioritized a lot of time. But I think we need to push on this more and more. I know there's a pandemic, but actually breastfeeding will help in a pandemic, because the immunity, it helps women's health, it helps babies' health. So we really should implement this maternity plan and the breastfeeding action plan. So if all the maternity wards or hospitals then implemented the World Health Organization 10 steps, and they were baby friendly, so that all mums get their babies on them directly. All these things will help. As we've talked about, if tongue tie was actually dealt with in the hospital, if we had a national milk bank, I don't think we've time necessarily to talk about that, but it's really a disgrace that we don't. I mean, we make most of the formula in the world, I think, but we don't have a milk bank for our breast milk. So I think that needs to be there. And I would add that all your healthcare professionals should be on message. GPs should be on message. All nurses should be on message. You don't need to be timing your baby's feeds. You don't need to be only feeding them 3 hours. I had a GP for my first baby who said after 6 weeks, oh, just give up. It's fine after 6 weeks. And I really wanted to keep going. I wasn't even saying I was in trouble. But they were just very dismissive of it. So I think all the healthcare professionals really need to be on message. So they're my 5 points for health. Can I make 5 points for the city now as well, Hazel? Sorry.
You can.
Okay. So I agree with Denise. We should learn from Limerick. Limerick is a breastfeeding friendly city. Dublin can do this, and we can do it better. And not better, but we can make it bigger, So stickers, I think, is a good idea with a charter for businesses. So if you're going to say you're breastfeeding friendly, you need to have doors that you can push buggies through. You need to have a baby changing area. And when I've been, like, as a mum, obviously I can't go to coffee shops now, unfortunately, but as a first time mum, I was like, why are not all coffee shops and restaurants clued into the fact that mothers are your audience? They are there in the morning. They will be there in the afternoon. They will buy all your coffee and all your treats because they're so sleep deprived. So, target them because they will come and they will spend money. So I don't know why more places aren't, more baby friendly like that. Now I've been thinking about, like, the stickers or whatever. Do we need to say it's a baby feeding campaign rather than a breastfeeding campaign? For some reason, I think Ireland, culturally, we've got an issue with breasts. I love that Michael D. Higgins sent out, if you didn't see his Christmas card this year, it's the Virgin Mary breastfeeding Jesus. And I think that should have been all over the place. But like, we might have a problem with it. But if someone says you can't breastfeed here, you're like, are you telling me my baby can't eat here? Because that's what my baby's doing. I think we really need to change that. Like, breastfeeding is just feeding. So if maybe we can do something more with the language around it if we need to. The Association of Breastfeeding Mothers in England had a great campaign of just photographs of mothers all around the city, breastfeeding babies and children, all in different places, on a bike rack or in a park. So I think, if we're doing a campaign, let's get ads to go with it from Dublin City Council. Because it's just cultural and it's just about seeing it more. And if we're going to make Dublin breastfeeding friendly, it's having more benches everywhere, more public toilets, because when you've just had a baby or you're about to have a baby, you need to use the loo more. And the fact that we don't have public toilets it hinders women from coming into the city. We need to make sure that our public transport is pram friendly. Most of it is, but not all of it is. You could be stuck at a bus stop waiting for buses because that space is already full, and more pedestrian zones as well, because accessibility is a huge part of how women want to move around the city. So they're my ideas. And I think, it's about supporting all mothers to feed, not just the breastfeeding mums, but just, I worry about the city now. I loved city centre. We've moved away from city centre now, but I loved it. And I worry that it will lose its beat now. But actually, if you bring in the mums, if you bring in the young families, the city will keep its heart. And I think being breastfeeding friendly, being baby friendly will be a huge part of that. So I think, let's talk about it more, but let's see it more. How can we see it more? Let's have a big campaign.
Well, in terms of that, so I'm going to feed into on the reason why I want to have these sessions, and I had a really good session with the Association of Doulas. I had one with Bonya Baha and Friends of Breastfeeding, and just hearing different people's idea on the extended breastfeeding groups, because those items you listed, Aoibhinn, are things that we need to do. So, and I completely agree with yourself and Denise on things that we need to do in terms of the city, because the city is empty. Like, my office is based here, and I can tell you that it is terrifying and horrific. But then we are going through a horrific time, and it's really challenging. And what I say on the Nighttime Economy Task Force with the department is that our city is kind of like a donut at the moment. And before it was like this donut with a really lovely filling. Now it's a donut with a hole, and things are more in the periphery, which is great in the villages, but we need to fill that hole. And the reason why I really want to make sure we have the breastfeeding friendly capital over the line before I leave, or soon anyway, by hopefully next Lord Mayor, if not by this one, is that we, as you say, can get the mothers in, to get the families in, and to make sure that we are family friendly. I think that there is a huge element of you can't be what you can't see when it comes to a lot of things. And if we see more mothers feeding their children in the city, it becomes naturally more friendly as well. In terms of the ad campaigns, I'm actually talking to Dublin Bus. We're hoping to have Ray actually as part of these chats on the transport side. And one of the ideas I had said to him was that we need to have them on bus ads. We need to have them inside the bus and outside the bus, but we need to, as you say, even have them around the city as well, that we have women being shown as feeding, and it's perfectly normal, because I think there's an element of educating as well. One of the comments here was saying that we need to do it from a young age. There does need to be, like, I see Alex and she breastfeeds her dinosaur, so, which sounds weird, I know, but it's that kind of very natural. Yeah, it's that natural thing that happens. And I think that would allow people to feel a lot more comfortable about the issue as well, because to your point about, I think people have a hang up about the word breast. So, the sooner we can not have a hang up about it and understand that this is something that's really natural and normal, the better we are. So, yeah, even
as well, Hazel, because like we know now, I mean, I didn't know before I had my first baby, but we know that you're legally allowed breastfeed everywhere. But I had no idea about that until I heard about it in that clinic, Denise, the 6-week clinic in Holles Street afterwards. And as a first-time mom, you're just like, okay, well, this is great. I can breastfeed anywhere. But when you do for the first time, you're just like, oh, Jesus, is anyone looking at me? And am I covered enough? And after a couple of times, then you're just like, anywhere, I can do this anywhere. But I don't think it's public knowledge that you can breastfeed everywhere. So I think if we did a campaign in Dublin, it would be beneficial to the mums, the first-time mums who are maybe conscious, to give them more confidence to say,
Exactly.
oh, I'm welcomed here. Oh, this is good. No, I can do this. So there's an awful lot, as you say, Hazel, around the culture of it. But I think, getting the messaging out there and normalizing it. If Alex is seeing it from a young age with you, isn't that marvelous? And shouldn't she see more of that in her everyday life that she's walking around?
Yeah, and I think this is to Denise's point as well, that we needed as a roadmap and in every workplace, in every public space as well, because I have heard horrific stories of women going back to work and kind of having to abruptly stop or not having the supports there in place. So this goes within our own public realm of the city, but also within the private sectors as well. And I think this is something that I think campaign wise we push, but also in terms of working with the various organizations. I'll be getting in touch with the likes of Aoibhinn and Dublin Chamber of Commerce to understand where, from a business perspective, they will be leading this. So there's a lot of comments here actually, which is great. Their extended breastfeeding, actually, that's another thing. I think we talk about normalizing breastfeeding, and I think a lot of people imagine from a young age. I'm not ashamed at all to say I still breastfeed my kid, and I think it needs to be normalized that extended breastfeeding is okay as well. So Denise, how have you, in your experience, what is the best way we can do? We some of the ideas we can look at to make sure extended breastfeeding is the norm as well.
Yes, I think we'll go back now to baby friendly. I think it starts with our hospitals achieving baby friendly status, and so that everybody's aware of what baby friendly is. When we were preparing for baby friendly a few years ago, a number of mothers didn't know what baby friendly was. So I think we need to talk more about breastfeeding and being a baby friendly hospital. So it starts really at birth, and then open the conversation with that it's fine to breastfeed for as long as you want. And the HSC for a while, they did have a campaign, Every Breastfeed Makes a Difference. And that was actually a wonderful campaign, because women who didn't think about breastfeeding breastfed their baby for one feed and then said, oh, I like that, and then breastfed for a second feed and whatever. So I think it starts, and we will have a national lead for implementing the Baby Friendly Initiative later in the year, which is fantastic. But that post will be advertised shortly. So very soon we will have hospitals baby friendly and more discussion around breastfeeding. And so women will learn to breastfeed for as long as they want. It's really important that we support women individually to what they want and normalize breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of the campaign about buses and advertising and having breastfeeding pictures on buses. I think that really would help with normalizing breastfeeding as well.
Well, not to put him on the spot, but I'm really hoping Ray Coyne will say yes to this when since I've been bugging him about it for so long. So now with 102 attendees hearing me say this, the pressure is on for him to deliver. So I'm sure he loves me doing it this way. So, but
that's the way. I mean, you have, I think, a gentle but forceful majority will support you in this, Hazel, because there's a lot of moms out there, and a lot of moms have been cooped up as well throughout the pandemic. If you've been on maternity leave for your pandemic, it's actually quite isolating. So I think a movement like this will gather the masses, because everyone's only dying to get out there. And when we do get out there, you want to be able to be comfortable wherever you are, in whatever way you want to breastfeed or feed your baby. My mum fed me for 3 years, which tells me in a way that I should be embarrassed about, but I'm very grateful to her.
Yes.
You're an amazing person, so obviously.
She did. I mean, and then she breastfed 5 after that, so fair play to my mum. But I just with the comments that are coming up there, Hazel, and it's actually something I hadn't thought about, but this is actually something that not only does the Department of Health and the council need to bring up, but it's actually something that we should really look at within the Department of Education as well, because it should be normalized from primary through secondary that breastfeeding is just a normal way of feeding your baby. And maybe we should probably look at imagery and language that children are provided with, I guess, throughout their education. So yeah, I think there's some excellent suggestions in there that it's just something we should be talking about.
But this is the thing. Susie says here that, like, as a midwifery student, that she finds it awkward, even some of her friends talking about it in their 20s. And I think this is the issue we have when, be it that it's the word breast, or be it that people just don't feel comfortable seeing feeding, is that it seems like a taboo subject when it really isn't. So, and I think if we had it from a young age, so Department of Education actually is a good shout from the comments and yourself there, because I think we need it from a young age all the way through, all the way up, and then having a more publicized kind of visual of breastfeeding women around the city would reinforce that this is natural. It's not something that people should be ashamed or shy to discuss. So and this comes to another comment about banning of advertisement of formula. So that's a bigger, I think, discussion that needs to be had on the policy and regulation space. But then the balance on that is, if formula companies can have this, why can't then there be more imagery of breastfeeding mothers to make sure we balance that debate, that discussion? So, and if we are looking then to ban formula, then that ban the publication or advertisement of formula, then that is something that the regulators need to look at. But I have concerns that they're around bus shelters outside hospitals, or they are so immediate that the first thing you do when you leave a hospital, or when you're in that vulnerable position of wondering whether you're feeding your child enough, is that you see a formula ad. And yeah.
Or the formula trolleys. I mean, that upsets me so much that when you're in the maternity ward, in the morning, there's a formula trolley, and there's like, what one do you want? Now, the first time I had my son, and this trolley came around, and it wasn't, manned by a nurse or anything like that. So I didn't know, was I supposed to take one or not? Because because the question was, I think it was, what formula would you like, or not necessarily would you like formula, maybe it was, but I was just like, am I supposed to take this? As I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll take the after, because I had one, I took it because I was like, maybe I'm supposed to take it. And the next time, I had my son just in October, and the trolley came around, and I just said, no, I'm breastfeeding. And the person actually seemed a little bit taken aback, and I was like, all right. So, but just the fact that even, if you've chosen to feed your baby by the bottle, that's your decision. Absolutely wonderful. But
I agree, Aoibhinn. There shouldn't be a formula trolley.
That everybody else in the ward is going to do that. So, and I've heard now that some hospitals in the UK say to mothers to bring their own formula with them if that's the way that they prefer to do it. And I wonder, would that be another way of just subtly giving women more confidence to say, we trust that you can breastfeed if that's what you'd like to do, because that's the normal way of feeding your baby. So there's all these little subtle things that I think actually, if the maternity hospitals were able to adopt the 10 steps from the WHO, I think that these
Yes, and they're working on that, but I know there are challenges in relation to formula definitely at the moment. I think there shouldn't be a formula trolley, Aoibhinn. If the mother wishes to formula feed and has made that decision, it's an informed choice for her, and she should be provided with her formula milk. But there shouldn't be a formula trolley. So I thank you for bringing that up, and I'll bring that up in discussion with my colleagues.
That would be great, Denise, because I think it comes back to this whole conversation comes about. It boils down to informed choices. Whatever the mother chooses, as long as they are informed and supported. And our discussion is around how to make supports better for people who choose to breastfeed or choose to breastfeed, to make sure that there is a good system in place for everyone. There is a question here actually from one of the audience, Denise. I'm going to pose to you. How can men show support in the area?
How can men show support?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question. Anytime I provided an antenatal breastfeeding class, that often came up. Women felt that they needed dad to give a bottle to bond with the baby. So no, men can do lots of things to get involved. I think it's very good that dads and partners go to an antenatal breastfeeding class so that they understand breastfeeding more, because there's a lot of information to take at a breastfeeding class, a lot to remember. And where if you're the baby's, the dad or partner is there with you, he remembers some information, he or she will remember information and be able to share that with you. That's really important, to go to an antenatal class together. And then I think following the birth, then the baby's father can wind the baby, hold the baby, take the baby for walks, and provide mother with nice meals, drinks. There's lots of things they can do apart from feeding the baby. And in many other cultures, men and dads aren't involved. They're there and they aren't asking that same question. Because I've asked this at antenatal breastfeeding classes to mothers from other countries. What happens in your culture. So I think it's really important that dads know that there's a role for them to be involved, and that's not just a mother, providing express milk for them to give in a bottle, or them giving a bottle to the baby. They can be involved in many ways.
I think that's a lovely point, Denise, because I think as a mom you feel guilty that you're not giving, if your partner is a man, you're not giving him the opportunity to bond in the same way. It's not necessarily that they have to give a bottle. But I love the question as well. How can men best show support? And I have 5 younger brothers, and at the start I was a little bit nervous, like, oh, I can't really breastfeed around them, but like it's just normal now, and they expect it as well. So it's a two-way, that we have to be confident around them, and then they have to show us support. So as Denise said, because I think the most helpful thing a man can do is make sure you have somewhere to sit, try and make you comfortable, and bring you a glass of water. I don't know about everyone else, but every time I was breastfeeding, I was just dying of thirst. Just
Darlene was saying cups of tea and glasses of water are great ways to support your partner. Actually, the thing I love best was when Patrick took Alex for 5 minutes so I can have a shower. So it was like amazing. But I'm going to be wrapping this up. Thank you so much to both of you. There is actually a very good suggestion here from Anne in relation to primary education, is the science factor of how cool it is that mothers are making milk. Actually, I see the Dr. Nihulan nodding her head there.
So science of it is amazing. Like it is, we're making this amazing food that gives our babies so much, and it's tailor-made, and it's got your immunities and everything in it. Like it's fabulous. So yeah, a resource like that. There's also somebody who says there's already a pack for SPHE in secondary school, and so maybe that just should be more widely used in schools as well. But yeah, the science of breastfeeding, that's
fabulous. Yeah. Hazel, could I share my quote with you?
Yes, absolutely. And we will be wrapping it up there. And thank you so much, folks, for joining. I'll let Denise wrap up on the quote, but just so you know, any questions we didn't answer, we're collating all the comments anyway, because I do want to talk to the department heads about this, and also the managers in DCC, and we'll get moving. But my email is lordmayor@dublincity.ie if you want to ask any questions or follow up, and I'm always going to be here, well, until they kick me out at the end of June. But thank you, Aoibhinn and Denise. And Denise, I'll let you wrap up with the quote.
Thank you very much. And this quote comes from Protection, Promotion, and Support of Breastfeeding in Europe, a Blueprint for Action, 2008. If a vaccine became available that could prevent 1 million or more child deaths a year, and that was moreover cheap, safe, administered orally, and required no cold chain, it would become an immediate public health imperative. Breastfeeding can do all of this and more, but it requires its own warm chain of support that is skilled care for mothers to build their confidence and show them what to do, and protection from harmful practices. So never more appropriate than in 2021 during a pandemic.
Well, yeah, and
We
very
have that
relevant.
vaccine.
Folks, thank you so much to everyone, and thank you to Aoibhinn and Denise, and we'll see you next Monday next Friday, sorry, if you're joining us. And in the meantime, look after yourselves and stay safe. Thank you so much. Thank you.